We begin with another deadly shooting and a weekend of gun violence in America. At least 12 people were killed and nearly 40 others hurt after multiple mass shootings in the states across the country.
Yeah, in Philadelphia, at least a dozen people were injured and 3 people killed in the popular South Street Entertainment District. And in Chattanooga, Tennessee, 3 people were killed and 14 others were hurt after a mass shooting outside a night spot there. Today, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is set to visit Uvalde, Texas, site, of course, of Robb Elementary and the massacre where 19 children and 2 teachers were slaughtered. Since that attack, less than 2 weeks ago, there have been more than 30 mass shootings in America. That's according to the Gun Violence Archive, which defines a mass shooting as an incident in which 4 or more people are shot or killed, not including the shooter. Again, look at that map. In the last 2 weeks, there have been 33 shootings, mass shootings. We have team coverage of this latest violence with NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin on the push for action in Congress, NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa in Philadelphia, and NBC News reporter Liz McLaughlin with us in Uvalde, Texas. Thank you all for being with us. We're going to begin with Emily and Liz. Good morning. I wish we were talking about something else. Emily, the Philadelphia shooting happened Saturday night, an area popular with both locals and tourists. What's the latest on the ground for the search for the shooters?
Kate, good morning to you. Still at this point, a lot of unanswered questions, including exactly how many people were involved in this shooting. Police believe there were 5 guns used in this shooting, and looking at the shell casings on the ground after the fact, they think that it may have started from a fight between 2 men that had escalated to then an exchange of gunfire turning into a shooting or a shootout rather of sorts. We know that one of those men, a suspected gunman, according to police, died in the shooting. The other police say may have been shot by an officer. Keep in mind, officers had been on the ground in this area, patrolling the area on foot when the gunfire started flying, those bullets started flying. So they were able to almost immediately render aid to treat people who had been injured. And then one of the officers, according to Philadelphia police, started firing at the active gunman. According to police, they can't say for certain whether they struck him, but they say that he dropped his handgun and then he took off on foot. But a lot of these people, a lot of the 14 people struck in this shooting incident had actually been innocent bystanders, ranging from 17 years in age to 69 years in age. And looking at this street in South Street here, this is an iconic place in Philadelphia. We're within walking distance of Penn's Landing, of Independence Hall. Hundreds of people were gathered here. Keep in mind, hundreds of people. And so when bullets started flying, just sheer chaos breaking out. Kate.
Emily, thank you. Liz, I want to turn over to you. Secretary Mayorkas' visit, we mentioned, to Uvalde. It comes as the community, understandably, still struggling to come to terms, not only with what happened, but with the police response and all the criticism. What's on his agenda today?
Kate, not many specifics, but Secretary Mayorkas is expected to get here this morning, meet with the workforce and officials. About 2 weeks ago, he praised Border Patrol agents who eventually encountered and killed that gunman. It was a tactical team that actually delayed or, went against the school district police chief's orders to stand down. And that was more than an hour after the shooting started. All of Secretary Mayorkas' meetings will be behind closed doors. They will be private as confusion and questions continue to swirl here. We're learning more about the timeline that's been changed 4 or 5 times after many inaccuracies from authorities here. Lots of tight-lips from officials now, but we're learning more from people who were there that day, including a funeral home worker, Cody Briseño, who was right across the street from Robb Elementary at Hillcrest Memorial, near where the gunman crashed his vehicle, his grandmother's truck. And he ran over to help with a coworker, asking if he was okay. And then he saw what he described as an evil look in his eye as he reached for his gun. Here's more from him on that harrowing account of the day. Let's listen.
I run to the side, and while I'm running to the side, I'm on the phone with my wife. Hey, bring me my gun. Bring me my gun. And as I'm saying that to my wife, I could hear the gun going off again. Pa, 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 pa. And I, what's going on? What's going on? That I told her that I bring me my gun because this guy's headed to the school. My intention was to stop him. And I mean, I feel guilty, man, because I mean, I couldn't stop him.
just heartbreaking. If you can only imagine, Briseño, not only the trauma of being shot at and running away, his wife did bring him his gun finally, and he went to the school, told police that the gunman had gone inside and tried to enter himself, but they told him to stand back and shut up. So he feels so much guilt, and not only that, he's having to work one of 2 small funeral homes here. He's buried 5 victims, including his own cousin. Just unimaginable.
No,
Kate?
Unimaginable. Liz, and you want to say to him, it's not your fault. Emily, the number of homicides in Philadelphia has more than doubled since 2013. What are people saying?
Well, the Philadelphia police commissioner called this a dark day for the city, describing the shooting this weekend as horrendous and unthinkable. They actually just reopened South Street here within the last hour or so because they had closed it, not just because of the recent spate of shootings across the city, but specifically on South Street here, what is typically a tourist magnet for both locals and then people coming in from out of town. We've seen this steady rise in homicides since 2013, as you mentioned. Here's more from the police commissioner on the rise in violence.
These incidents have an exponential effect on our community, and it not only impacts the individual that's been directly victimized, but it victimizes their loved ones, their families, and their neighbors, neighborhoods all over the world. It's unacceptable. It's beyond unacceptable. And we're still using every resource available to get to the bottom of what occurred, not just out there last night, but behind this gun violence in this city, period.
And Philadelphia isn't alone in its fight and struggle to stem and curb gun violence. More than 12 cities across the country have set unfortunate records, all-time highs for the number of murders in 2021. Kate?
Emily Ikeda, Liz McLaughlin, thank you both so much.
And in Washington, Congress returns from a holiday recess this morning, facing growing calls for federal action on gun reform. NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin joins us now. Good morning, Julie. I want to get into the weeds a little bit. In the Senate, we have this group of bipartisan lawmakers working on some kind of gun reform that could actually become law. So what's the latest on those negotiations?
Yeah, good morning, Zinkley. So in the Senate, everything takes momentum. It's up to the senators to craft a package that can actually pass with 60 votes. But we heard yesterday from 2 negotiators in that group, just as the Senate gets ready to come back today into town and hold these conversations in person once again, just some progress as to how the group is doing. I want you to take a listen.
I've never been part of negotiations as serious as these. There are more Republicans at the table talking about changing our gun laws and investing in mental health than at any time since Sandy Hook.
My hope is we'll get at least half the Republican conference. You know, that should be the goal here. We're going to have to be realistic about what can do that. Senator Murphy alluded to the idea that it's not going to be everything, certainly, that Democrats would like.
Yeah, look, it's certainly not going to be nearly as expansive as Democrats are hoping it to be. In the House this week, they're going to vote on a series of bills that stand almost no chance in the Senate, including things like raising the minimum age to 21 for purchasing some of these rifles and banning some high-capacity ammunition. But in the Senate, they're working on things like red flag laws, enhanced background checks, though not as enhanced as the House would like to pass, as Democrats would like. And look, Minority Leader McConnell, who is going to have the final say here in order to get half of his conference on board with this, kept saying last week in Kentucky over and over again that the top 2 things that he's focused on is mental health and school safety.
And clearly a serious issue. We heard Senator Murphy speak to that. And another big issue on the Hill and in D.C. this week is the January 6th committee. They're expected to have more discussions this week. Those long-awaited public hearings on the Capitol attack are beginning Thursday. What can we expect from those?
Yeah, look, it's been a year of closed door, behind the scenes work for this committee in the House, in which many times they faced opposition. They faced blockades from the Republican members, including from President Trump, who have repeatedly called the committee illegitimate, though it is bipartisan, of course, with Vice Chair Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, 2 Republicans on the 9-member panel. But look, their first long-awaited hearing is happening this Thursday, the first of at least 6, we are told, and they're going to be showing videos of some of the Trump family members and other folks that were testifying behind closed doors. They're hoping that this is the moment that the public really gets to see their work and gets to see what actually unfolded leading up to January 6th and what happened in the days after the insurrection, and potentially linking the former president's involvement in all of this.
And Julie, briefly, staying with January 6th, I know that over the weekend we got that news that the Justice Department has declined to prosecute Mark Meadows, that's former President Trump's chief of staff, for contempt of Congress. And at the same time, another top Trump advisor was arrested for snubbing congressional subpoenas. What should we know about this?
Yeah, the committee has achieved a lot here in their words for getting Peter Navarro, for getting Steve Bannon to be indicted by the Justice Department. This is no small feat. Of course, that happened for Peter Navarro because he snubbed a congressional subpoena. He failed to cooperate with the January 6th Select Committee. But the committee also says they are, quote, puzzled that Mark Meadows, Dan Scavino, two of former President Trump's top officials, the Justice Department declined, I should say, to subpoena those, to indict, those two individuals. They say they don't understand why that happened. Of course, lawyers for Dan Scavino and Mark Meadows are pleased with the Justice Department's take here.
Julie Sirkin, important analysis. Thank you so much.
Now to the economy, and the skyrocketing price of gas filling up your tank is becoming more of a challenge now, with the price of a gallon reaching another new high over the weekend. According to AAA, the national average of a gallon of regular right now, $4.84. That's an increase of 20 cents in just a week. So what's behind the new rise and what's being done to control the high costs of living right now? Let's bring in Caleb Silver, the editor-in-chief at Investopedia. Caleb, several states like New York, where I live, and Georgia have suspended their gas taxes to try to help out drivers, but drivers are still paying a lot to fill up their tank. What's being done at the federal level to bring down prices, and when could we see changes?
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't look great for gas prices for the rest of the summer. JP Morgan predicting we'll hit $6 a gallon by the end of the summer. If you go out to California, there's a gas station that's selling gas at $9.60 up in Mendocino County. Not a lot the federal government can do except urge more production and more refinement, except we're kind of at capacity here in the U.S. In fact, we're about 5% below capacity from where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of refineries were shut down, and it takes a lot to get those to get back up to speed. And the U.S. is exporting a lot of its own oil right now to other countries who have turned away from importing it from Russia. So we have a real supply-demand crunch going on right now, and that's going to impact drivers and the cost of gasoline for the next several months.
I can't believe you said over $9 a gallon in California. That's crazy. The gas prices obviously impacting what we're all doing, our behavior. Right now, U.S. gasoline consumption levels are running 3% lower than a year ago, according to DataTrack. Those researchers called that number a troubling sign. Yeah, explain why that is troubling, and what happens if gas consumption levels dip even lower, especially during what everybody thought was going to be a busy travel season.
Yeah, that's something we like to call demand destruction. When prices get too high, consumers back out. So we're driving a little bit less, believe it or not, filling up a little bit less than we were a year ago, even though demand seems high because we're finally able to get out and drive around and go visit family and friends. But because prices remain high and keep climbing higher, folks are filling up less and less or finding alternative means. And you get that demand destruction here in gasoline, you could start to see it spreading to other parts of the economy. We know consumer sentiment is at a 10-year low. Consumer spending has hung in there. But the cure for high prices, Kate, is high prices, because eventually consumers tap out, and so do small businesses. If you have to fill up a fleet of 10, 20 vans to keep your small business going, you're going to find other ways to do that. And that demand destruction eventually hurts spending, and spending drives 70% of U.S. GDP.
And quickly, the other big elephant in the room, inflation right now. The feds are going to release the updated consumer price index from May, showing just how high costs are and if inflation has reached a peak. I know consumer price index did dip in April, but it's still at its highest in decades. Tell us about that. What do these new numbers mean?
Yeah, we're going to get the consumer price index at the end of the week for last month. And what we're seeing is inflation may have peaked. It was 8.5% in March. It was 8.3% in April. It may have peaked. That doesn't mean it's coming straight down the hill. We're going to have high prices across the commodities board through the rest of the summer, driven by energy, which then translates into higher fertilizer costs, higher shipping costs, basically higher costs for everything we pay. We have to deal with inflation right now because it's going to be with us for the rest of the summer, at least probably for the rest of the year.
Caleb Silver, thanks so much for being with us.
Now to some welcome news for parents of infants around the country who have been struggling during the baby formula shortage. Abbott Nutrition announced Saturday that it has resumed production of formula at its plant in Sturgis, Michigan. The plant shut down in February because of product contamination, making the nationwide shortage worse. Abbott says it will start on its EleCare brand of formula and other specialty formulas for infants with food allergies. Despite this good news, though, the Biden administration is being taken to task over its response time. Commerce Secretary Gia Raimondo told CNN's Jake Tapper Sunday that she didn't learn about the shortage until more than a month after the Michigan plant shut down.
You're the Secretary of Commerce. When did you first learn of this problem?
I first learned about it, a couple of months ago. So this is April? This is a difficult issue, but yes, probably April.
NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch joins us now from Sturgis, Michigan, to talk about all of this. Jesse, good to see you. Now that Abbott has restarted production, when can we realistically expect to see products on store shelves?
Yeah, Sinclair, looks like that's at least a couple of weeks away from now. They've restarted production here. They're prioritizing specifically some of their specialty formulas because we know that, of course, many children, many babies rely on these formulas, but there are people who specifically rely on those that are for people with allergies and have other specialty needs. So Abbott says it is prioritizing those, beginning with EleCare, which will be released to the public, they say, to consumers around June 20th. So they're saying released. I'm trying to get some clarity on what exactly that release is. Does that mean that's when we'll see trucks rolling out of the plant here in Michigan? Does that mean that's when it'll hit store shelves? So we're trying to get some clarity on that. And also, they say around June 20th. They don't give a specific date. Do want to reference part of a statement that Abbott shared on Saturday. The company is saying, we understand the urgent need for formula, and our top priority is getting high-quality, safe formula into the hands of families across America. So that is what the company says it is focused on right now, again, specifically looking at those specialty formulas first.
And Jesse, I'm glad you highlighted what they said about high-quality, safe formula, right? Because it's important we don't forget that this plant shut down because of contamination problems that could have been fatal to infants. So now that it's back up and running, what stipulations did the FDA put in place in order for Abbott to safely restart?
Yeah, so the Biden administration has put in place a consent decree that they're in agreement with right now with Abbott. And that decree specifically emphasizes several points, both for initial startup and also for months from now for Abbott Nutrition to maintain this plant. But bottom line, to get things back up and running here, the FDA has said that it needs to see from Abbott an independent expert come in, look at their sanitation processes, their dry out processes, so that they have proper protocols in place here. They also want to see environmental testing. So all of that has had to be gone through and shared with the FDA, according to this consent decree, before production could restart here. And Abbott says that it has met the initial requirements set in place.
And Jesse, real quickly and briefly, we've seen the Biden administration fly infant formula from overseas. Are those flights still happening? And what else is the Biden administration doing to help ease the shortage as it stands right now?
Yeah, so the White House says that there are more Operation Fly Formula flights that will be coming to the U.S. later this week. We expect 2 to be coming from Melbourne, Australia, to the States by week's end. They'll be taking off later this week. And then there's also the Defense Production Act, which is a common term now because of what has gone on throughout the pandemic. Bottom line, though, that allows the White House to prioritize the production of baby formula and specifically looks to compel suppliers to provide supplies, ingredients to baby formula suppliers ahead of other customers to try to get more formula on shelves sooner.
We've seen a lot of shortages during this pandemic. Thanks for breaking this one down. Jesse, thanks.
Now to that dramatic news from overseas. By the end of the day, the United Kingdom could be in need of a new prime minister. This afternoon, Boris Johnson will face a vote that could remove him from power. It's the latest fallout from the revelations about lockdown parties in his Downing Street residence that landed Johnson with a fine from police. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now from outside Parliament in London. Steph, good to see you. Good morning. This is quite a turn for Boris Johnson. It comes less than 3 years after he secures a Brexit deal with the European Union. He's swept into victory in 2019. How did we get here, and what does it mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, Katie, he came in very popular. And this is one of those situations of people getting upset about a politician standing up and saying, do as I say, not as I do. And these revelations were made public that these parties took place in Downing Street, and there were a number over a period of a year, according to a report that just came out last month, that during the height of the pandemic, when people were being told not to gather, not to go inside, not to basically to seclude themselves at home and not see friends and family, there were a series of parties that were held that Boris Johnson attended himself. And they were parties that included alcohol and food and didn't really look a lot like essential business. And they were indoors and outdoors. And what happened was he stood up in front of Parliament and he said there were no rules broken. He then had to come back and say, well, it appears rules were broken and I didn't realize it. Then he is, as you say, he was fined £50 for attending a birthday party. All of this has undermined people's confidence in him, even within his own party. And this is important for tonight. This is about his party, the Conservative Party. They're the ones calling for this no confidence vote. At least 54 members of the party had to write letters to a committee saying they wanted to hold this vote. But a lot more will have to vote against him in this vote this evening. 180 have to vote no confidence in him for him to be removed from office. But watch those numbers, right? Even if he does win this vote later on tonight, if the margin is really small, he may still have to step down in a matter of months because the ministers will say it's really just untenable for you to continue as prime minister, Kate.
Okay, that makes sense. And if he loses, if all those people go against him, or if he, you know, if as you say, if he wins by not very much, what happens next?
Well, if he loses, then he steps down. I mean, he will be removed. And then the party will have to vote for someone else. And that's a process that could take weeks. But again, you have this situation. This happened with Prime Minister Theresa May as well. In 2018, there was a no confidence vote that she won, but a third of her party voted against her. And eventually, months later, she had to say, this was during Brexit and her handling of Brexit, that she was going to step down. It won't leave this country without a leader. He continues to be prime minister until they select someone to take over. Now, you know, Boris Johnson is also a pretty stubborn guy, and you have to imagine he's going to stick around. And the feeling is that he will survive this vote. But again, it'll be the question of those margins.
Stephanie Gosk, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Turning to Miami, cleanup is underway this morning after a storm system brought torrential rain, winds, and flooding to the city Saturday. The storm dumped more than 10 inches of rain on Miami over 3 days. Winds were clocked at 40 miles per hour, but it wasn't quite strong enough to be classified as a tropical storm. The most serious impact was from the flooding. Fire crews rescued several drivers stranded as the waters quickly rose. The storm also left about 4,000 without power in Miami-Dade County.
Let's get a check of your morning news now. Weather.
Michelle Grossman joins us now. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. So good to see you on this Monday morning. And yeah, we had a lot of rain in Florida Friday into Saturday, nearly 15 inches in some spots. And we do have our first named storm of the season. That's Tropical Storm Alex, although it wasn't a tropical storm officially when it dropped that rain in Florida. So here are some of your rainfall totals. Hollywood, Florida, 14.85 inches of rain, and it came quickly. So that's why we all saw those flooding pictures throughout the weekend in Florida. Miami, over 11 inches of rain. Naples, Florida, over 8 inches, and over 6.5 inches of rain in West Palm Beach. So they're going to be drying out on this Monday. Now here's the latest on Tropical Storm Alex. Winds at 65 miles per hour, so still pretty strong. It's affecting Bermuda right now with tropical storm conditions. It's moving quickly the east-northeast at 28 miles per hour. That's good news. It's going to zip on out of here, but first bringing those tropical storm conditions to Bermuda. And then it's going to weaken rapidly. It's facing some wind shear. It's facing some cooler waters as well. So we're going to see it a remnant low by later on today, and then it's going to become history. Now, we are also watching some severe weather, also showers and storms, a soggy start for many on our Monday. You can see some lightning, hearing some thunder in parts of the Central Plains into the mid-Mississippi Valley. So 6 million people at risk today. We're looking at the chance for some damaging hail, an inch or greater. Winds gusting to 60 miles per hour. Could also see a few tornadoes. So we're going to watch that as we go throughout the day, especially where we're seeing that yellow shading from parts of the Dakotas into Kansas, Nebraska, and the panhandle of Oklahoma and also Texas. And then we're looking at some storms likely Paducah, also into Memphis. Tomorrow we're looking at severe weather likely, where we're looking at Nebraska, Kansas, into the panhandles of Texas and Oklahoma once again, with the chance of some large hail, 2 inches or greater, winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, and also the chance for some severe weather once again in terms of tornadoes. Rainfall forecast, that's going to be a big one. Heavy rainfall totals up to 4 inches in a lot of spots, especially where you see those yellows, the reds, the oranges. That's where we're seeing the heaviest rain. And as we go throughout today, we're also looking at a nice day. We had a beautiful weekend in the Northeast. We're going to see that once again, you guys, in New England, all the way down to the Mid-Atlantic. Back to you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.